I was with the depression, the anxiety, the result of all of that, and PTSD. I was not able to work for about 2 years.
Mm.
I'm a critical incident stress management team member for first responders. And the head of that team had reached out and said, sorry to hear about the loss. If you want to talk, let's go out for a coffee. So I took this guy up on the coffee. And we're sitting there having coffee, and he says to me, "So, when's the first time your family abandoned you?" And all these memories came in. And yeah, that them telling me on that day in August 2016 that they never wanted anything to do with me ever again just knocked me flat on my ass. And I got a service dog who literally has saved my life.
What's up, you beautiful beasts? I'm Katie. I'm on a mission to help humans become the best possible versions of themselves and to strive for overall health, mental health, emotional health, physical health, all of the healths, without ever having to step on a scale. I have had the privilege to talk to all kinds of different humans who've been through a plethora of experiences just being a human and existing. I believe that every single time somebody shares their story, at least one person listening will learn from it, be inspired by it, and maybe, just maybe, even change the entire direction of their life. These are the stories of humans unveiling their beautiful beast. Keep listening. This is the Unveiling the Beast podcast. What's up, you beautiful beasts? Welcome back to the show. Today, I'm hanging out with Lee Atherton, who is an end-of-life grief and resilience coach. We had an amazing conversation. This is another one of those where we are complete strangers and we met in a Facebook group. So, as always, I hope something lands with you today. I hope something you hear tugs at your heartstrings, and or I hope you laugh.
I love being a goofball. I tell people, I might have gray hair, but I'm still a kid.
Yeah, I think we all are, you know.
It's when we give ourselves permission to let that child be visible.
Yeah. And it's super important to continue connecting to your inner child, I think. Because
I agree.
The inner child is who needs the most healing. So
true. Yes.
Yes. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm with a complete stranger. We met on a Facebook group, and we're going to find out lots of stuff about Lee. How do you say your last name?
Atherton.
Atherton? Okay, that's how I was pronouncing it in my head. So awesome.
Yeah.
So can you tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and how you got to be who you are?
Sure. So first off, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, whenever you happen to be listening. I'm Lee Atherton. I'm an end-of-life and grief expert. That's one hat I wear. Also a grandma to a 2.5-year-old little boy who I just absolutely adore. And I'm a service dog owner, which has an important piece in my story. So
okay,
how did I come to be who I am? Interesting. Growing up, I was told that and I'm okay with this statement now after years of deep soul searching, but I was told that I would never amount to anything more than a secretary. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I was doing. I became a church secretary. Actually, I was told if I knew what was good for me, I'd take that job or else. Whose voice might have been? Anyway, that job was really a life-changing job for me. The pastor and I started within a day of each other. So talk about goofy, because he was too. And we had a lot of goofy times together as we were both trying to figure out this particular setting's way of being. So I became a secretary at the church as a church member who was just peripherally involved. You know, I had young kids at the time. You're supposed to bring your kids to church, so I did. But the pastor, whose name is Lee, was really a person who changed my perspective on myself. He was the first when he said, "You can be and do anything you want." And really, in my 5 years of working with him, did a lot to help me overcome my insecurities and my I'm not worth much of anything. Yes. So 5 years went by. I had outgrown the job. I was singing in the church choir at the time, and we had a special event on a Sunday afternoon, and the anthem we were singing is "Here I Am, Lord." Practiced, rehearsed that for months, and it was just a beautiful song. And then came that afternoon, and I wasn't singing, I was crying because the words just felt like my words. Here I am, ready to serve your people. And so, jumping ahead, gave my notice at the church. And when I did, one of the deacons at the meeting I was saying this at jumped up, ran across the room, gave me a great big hug and said, "It is about time you're going to seminary. You're going to make an amazing pastor." And I said, "What?" Exactly. That was my reaction. And because this is audio, folks, if you could have seen Katie's face, it was the same as what mine was. So, you know, that was the furthest thing from my mind. But when he said it, other people affirmed it. So again, jump ahead, and I found myself saying, yes, I'll go to seminary. But I had to get my bachelor's degree before I could get my master's. Went back to a local college. My first class was a philosophy class, which was crazy. And I met someone who has since become one of my best friends, Donna. She was there taking the class for the same reason. She knew that she wanted to be a hospice chaplain. So our paths were parallel. We both got accepted as non-baccalaureate students to a local seminary in a school where the fastest you could get a master's in divinity was 3 years. And we had classmates who had been there for 15 years. Donna and I started the same year, graduated the same year. So lots of parallels. All during this time, she's saying, "I really think you should be a hospice chaplain." And I kept telling her, "You are crazy. There is no way on God's good earth I'm going to do that work." We both graduated, both got ordained, had our jobs, she in hospice, me serving a local church. My job kind of fell apart, and so I wasn't working. Donna was going away on an extended vacation and needed someone to fill in, was having trouble finding someone. And she said, "Come on, you can do anything short term." I said, "Yeah, you're right. Okay, I'll do it." And as they say, the rest is history, right? I spent many years in the world of hospice and then began doing the work of a hospice chaplain and bereavement coordinator on my own. And that's how Coach Rev at the Crossroads came to be. And I never would have guessed that. Back when my mom said, "All you'll be is a secretary," I truly believed that. And I look at where my life has come now and just say, wow.
Yeah. I love that you were a secretary. Like you were fulfilling the prophecy or whatever. You were fulfilling that projection from your mother, which led you to what you do now. So that's really cool.
Right?
I love that.
It is so cool. So cool. I don't call it a coincidence. I call it a God incidence. And there were so many of those along the way. Just, really cool.
So so you work with people at the end of their lives. correct. And then the grief part, that's for the people who survived them, right? So what has that been like, working with the people at the end of their lives? Like how are their I want to say spirits. How's their spirit different than people who are continuing to live, thinking that they're going to continue to live? Does that make sense?
It really does.
Yeah.
Yes. How is their spirit different? I love the way you phrased that question. It is such an incredible honor to be brought into someone's life, to be welcomed into somebody's life and their home, most often, at such a profound time in their life. And I've found that when someone does open their heart and open their home to end of life support, which comes in many forms, we have an opportunity to help their spirit be more at peace with the fact that they're dying. And I like to use the phrase, helping people live their dying. I think when I have a successful time with someone at end of life, it's that person for whom I've been able to help them live. Now, imagine getting a terminal diagnosis, and some people just feel defeated and give up, and that's it. Their life has ended. They may still be breathing, their heart may still be beating, but life has ended. Instead of that, what are you going to do with the time you have left, right? How can you, no matter where you are, how you're feeling physically, how can you still live emotionally? How can you, excuse me, I've got to plug in my laptop. How can you still be vibrant? How can you, what do you want to say to your family, your friends, those people who are left behind? You have a gift of the time to make that happen.
Yeah.
I tell the story of a young man who I met many, many years ago. He was in his mid to late 30s. Christmas Day, he had an awesome Christmas. New Year's Eve, he was in the hospital with severe back pain. New Year's Day, given the diagnosis that he had stage 4 bone cancer. Came onto our hospice services. He couldn't live at home because he was living on his own, couldn't take care of himself. So I met him in a nursing home. Someone in their 30s shouldn't be in a nursing home. It was hard. As I came to know him, I learned that he had 2 children, one who was still a teenager, one who was 21, I think. He had divorced. He was estranged from his children, hadn't spoken to them in years. One of his wishes was to reconnect with them. I also learned who his favorite author was, an author from childhood. And he had a wish to go fishing one more time. So I met him in January. He died, I think it was in April, maybe May. But in that time, I, along with my hospice team, helped him reconnect with his children. And I helped facilitate a meeting with them where by the end of it, they were all able to say, I forgive you to each other. And the daughter was making plans to bring dad to her home to take care of him at end of life. I found the author and everything fell into place. I said, I would love to get an autographed book. He said, well, I'm coming to visit my mom, who happens to live in the same town as this patient was. So he came with a couple of books and some other memorabilia and popped in and surprised this guy with a visit. And we were able to load him and a wheelchair up in an ambulance and bring him for that one last fishing trip. That's what I call living your dying. And anytime I can help someone do that, oh my God, I am so honored.
That's really awesome. And this is bringing emotions up for me because I a lot of us experienced a lot of death like in 2020. For me, particular 2020, all the deaths that I experienced was there, none of them were COVID related. But what this is bringing up for me, and the listener, anyone who's been listening a while, know that I can't call her anything but a sister. We were children of two single moms. And so we all lived in a house together. We shared a room. We fought over stuff, like little kids do. Like I grew up with her. And she and her mom moved to Minnesota. So I'm in California. So they moved to Minnesota. And long story short, we were reunited shortly after she was diagnosed with cancer. It was small cell carcinoma of the larynx, and only she and 130 other people had it. Had it that's known of, and the others were older men who drank and smoked their whole lives. And she was 33. So, well, at the time she was 32. So she had aggressive chemo and radiation, and she had a checkup that she was completely clear of cancer. And so I interviewed her right after that. So we talked about after fighting cancer and surviving, then a few months later, it was all over her body, stage 4. And she was like such a I don't know, she was so like feisty and just like one of those people who like, I love talking about myself. Let's talk about my cancer. So I sat with her during her first chemo treatment for the second time. And she and her husband had been making a bucket list for the rest of, what to do for the rest of her life. Unfortunately, it was right before COVID happened. And so everything shut down. They couldn't do much on the list. But what they did was they drove a camper to Minnesota and had a waking wake. So she's like, if I'm going to be the center of attention at the party, I might as well be there. Like she was so like, so she's been really my only example of like, if I know I'm not going to be here much longer, how I want to live. And so that's what that brought up for me was here. And ladies and gentlemen, I will post her 2 episodes in the show notes so that you can go back and listen. That was season 1. But she, yeah, that was a tough loss because I couldn't be with her because of COVID. Yeah. So it's like a bittersweet.
Yeah.
Like I loved her attitude, but I hated that we lost her. So.
What's your biggest takeaway from that experience?
Well, one thing I asked her, because she's bold and feisty, I was like, what's it like knowing you're going to die? Yeah. And she said, we're all going to die. Like you could be hit by a car tomorrow. And I'm like, that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like, her point was live every day like you're going to die tomorrow, because you never know.
You never know.
Never know.
Yeah.
So
I offer a workshop called Wait, I'm Not Ready. And it's about planning for the end of your life. And that idea that what if you're hit by a bus tomorrow? And raced to the ER and people have to make decisions.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So
I think people are so afraid of death, rather than embracing that it's just part of life. Death is part of life. You've heard that before. Um, so I kind of want to skip to the people that you help after their loved one has passed.
Mm-hmm.
How do you communicate with them?
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Several ways. So I connect with them, some of them in person. If my client has been a local person who I've visited, some of them are people around the world. One of the gifts of COVID was this thing called Zoom and how
Yeah.
it really exploded, right?
Yeah.
Um, which pros and cons in anything, but it has opened the doors to be able to support people no matter where they are, which is pretty cool. So I offer support groups for loss of any kind. People think of grief as when someone you love, a person, a human has died. What about your pet?
Yeah.
A lot of people think there's not grief around there, but for some, it can be just as devastating as a human. Um, loss of your home. If you're in an earthquake,
Yeah.
loss of your job. So lots of losses. Um, Workshops that I offer, retreats I offer. So on a lot of different ways. And if I'm meeting someone who is grieving and isn't finding the support that they find resonates with them, I'll create something if I can, because I don't want anyone out there grieving alone.
Yeah.
It's a hard journey. It's a crazy journey. There's no handbook for how to do it.
Yeah. I love
Um,
that you bring up that there's different kinds of grief, because in the community that I'm in, we talk about micro griefs and macro griefs, where the macro griefs are like death and, like you said, losing a home, losing a pet. And then there's the micro griefs of maybe losing a relationship, or even like if you made up how you want a relationship to be in your head and you never had that, you're still grieving the loss of that thing, even though it was never there.
right.
So I appreciate you for bringing that up.
Thanks. You're
Mm-hmm.
you're right. And there's so many of those micro griefs
Yeah.
that we don't know the people we're running into every day who are grieving on some level.
Yeah.
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 Um, I talk about how to support someone who's grieving. A lot of us, if a friend's spouse dies, we want to be there helping and supporting as best we can. But in our society here in the Western world, we tend to ignore death, um, pretend it's never going to happen, and we become afraid of it. We become distanced, and we don't know
Yeah.
how to support our friends, right? So, how do you, as a friend of a griever, be there for them?
Yeah.
And again, grief in lots of ways.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I tend to, when somebody's sick, like my stepdad, he's been in the hospital 728 times. I'm exaggerating, but that's what it feels like in the last 10 years. Um, Prostate cancer, lung cancer, stroke, heart attack, like all the big things.
Wow.
He's still going, man. He's like, his body keeps trying to kill him, and he's like, um, and what I've noticed, like just being with that, is I tend to distance myself from people who are sick because I don't know how to be around that, and I'm working on it. Um, and then there's also the times in the beginning when he'd go to the hospital a lot for AFib, like he'd have like weird heart rhythms. We'd
Yeah.
all pack in his hospital room and like just hang out, me and my brother, my mom. Um, and so like sometimes I'm like, I don't know how to do this. And then other times I'm just like, I'm gonna be in the room, but I still don't know how to be around you. um, do you actually have experience with that when you're with somebody at their end of life, like with their family, maybe distancing themselves from the sick? Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We all respond differently.
Mm-hmm.
From one who will be by their loved one's bedside every possible moment to one who just won't come. Not because they don't want to, but they
Right.
can't, right? Usually it's they can't. Uh, and I think the message that I try to share with people in that regard is that, and with grief, there's no right way to do it,
No.
right? And give grace to the people who aren't doing it the way you feel they should,
Yeah.
right? I remember when my dad was dying, and uh, I lived in the same home with my kids, so my kids and I were there all the time. My sister lived fairly close by, and she would come over once a week, every few days as it got closer. And there was a brother who stayed away for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And initially, I was like, well, why aren't you here doing for dad what I'm doing for dad? You live 2 minutes away.
Yeah.
And then taking the time to look at who was my brother? What was he going through at the time? What was this like for him? And realizing that there was just too much complexity there for him. The fear of death, the fear of losing his dad, not knowing how to have any of the hard conversations, and hitting him, what's this mean for me? I'm going to die someday too.
Yeah.
Right? And he just couldn't face it.
Yeah. I think what people could learn from this, at least what I've learned, is I would be the distancer, like I'd be the distant relative, and then I would beat myself up for it. Like I should be there. I should be doing so what I would invite listeners to do if you're ever in this situation is just notice without judging. Like notice, okay, I'm distancing myself, and instead of saying, "Oh my gosh, you're a piece of crap because you're not there," be like, "Okay, what's going on? Why am I not there? What's going on in me? What am I afraid of?" So,
And
yeah.
that's an excellent piece of advice to give folks. And how can you express your support and your love in ways other than being there? You don't have to be right there to be support.
Yeah. I beat myself up for a while because I couldn't be with her, but I didn't know how much of it was I can't be there, or am I distancing myself? Because everything in 2020 was just like so confusing for everybody in every way. And so I'm like, so how much of this is me because I know my tendency to back off, and how much of this is like you're already so sick, you don't want to catch anything else to make the process quicker.
Yeah.
So
yeah. And where do you know the answer to that? How do you balance it? So self-reflection is good.
mm-hmm.
In talking to people who are near end of life, they want you to be real and true and to say, you want me there or not?
Yeah.
When there's all the time in the world, we can pussyfoot around and see if we can figure it out. But when the time is limited, ask them.
Yeah. There was one time that I did, I actually had some counseling on this, where long story short, I was in a very toxic job. It wasn't always toxic, but the end of it was toxic, and I pulled myself out of it. And one of the things I did was Megan, who was my sister, she was up here visiting. We already knew she was terminal, and she and my brother and her husband planned to go out in their camper in the desert or something, and they invited me, and I was like, I didn't go because I didn't want to get in trouble at work. And so then later on, looking at it, I'm like, was I really afraid of getting in trouble at work, or was I distancing myself, So, and that was the last time my brother saw her alive. It would have been my last time. So it's things like that, like you question. And I highly recommend therapy or some sort of coaching after you lose a person, because I stuffed that emotion for about 3 years.
And if you stuff it, it's going to come back to bite you.
It will, for sure.
Yeah.
So, other than what you do, tell me a little bit about like you. Like, what kind of person are you? Stranger?
Yeah, strangers. I am just an easygoing person, comfortable, relaxed. Who am I? So, have you got an hour or three? No.
I have 17.
On one hand, I'm kind of simple. On the other hand, I'm a pretty complex person. What I was starting to say was what I thought of at the beginning when I was talking about working at a church and my call to ministry and all that. Growing up, I was a Catholic, and people were here and the priest was like way up here. There was no way you were ever going to talk to the priest. They were like holier than thou. I like to reassure people that that's not me. I'm not a priest. I'm a minister, a Protestant minister. I don't care. I'm the same as you, right?
Yeah.
And no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, I welcome you into my world. I'm a first responder chaplain. People hear, oh, you're a clergy person. I have to be on my best behavior. Well, let me tell you, I sit around the table at the fire station. I've heard it and seen it. Right. So there's that. I've got family is important to me. I've got 3 kids, 3 adult kids, a grandson and another grandchild on the way. Yeah.
I love
kids. I'm a service dog handler, owner, and that's a powerful part of my story. So my life has been overcoming challenges along the way in a lot of ways. In 2016, my older brother died of a drug overdose. We think maybe suicide. I'm the youngest of 4 children by a number of years, enough years that I sort of was like an only child growing up. I broke out of the dysfunction of my family, the alcoholism, the mental health challenges, the pretending that we lived in a fairy tale world while at home it wasn't fairy tale-ish. This brother who died was an alcoholic and a drug addict. And there were 2 times that I testified against him in court because, I don't care who you are. You're going to drive drunk and risk running over a kid? Not letting it happen if I have any say in it, right?
Yeah.
The second time, I had just brought my dad home from open heart surgery. And this brother was drunk or high, I don't know, verbally attacked my dad and was beginning to get physical. So you got to leave.
Yeah.
Got in his dump truck, drove his dump truck into the house, and then drove down the driveway. We've got a little bit of a long driveway, and hit something at the end of the driveway. I called the police. I said, he's out there driving drunk. They came over, they arrested him, put him in jail. He had a dangerousness hearing where they determined he was too dangerous to be let go before his trial. That was in late summer, I think. His trial wasn't until the following spring. My dad died during that time. So my brother didn't get to see him, say goodbye. He couldn't come to the funeral. That was blamed on me because I was the one who had called the police. You know what? It wasn't me. It was
Right.
him. He's the one who chose to do what he did.
Exactly.
It was 5 years later when this brother died, and my whole family got together. That day, you know, like people do. Oh, someone died. We all got to rally around and support each other. They weren't going to let me know about it. The brother who died, his ex-wife and children were at this gathering, and heard my family say, if she shows up, we're calling the police and having her arrested for trespassing. We don't want her even knowing that he died, talking about me. And this ex-sister-in-law stood up for me and said, you can't do that. You've got to let her know. So they did finally let me know. And then she told me a phone call later that afternoon that my family was all together and saying that they never wanted anything to do with me ever again, me or my children. That was in 2016. I was, with the depression, the anxiety, the result of all of that, and PTSD, I was not able to work for about 2 years. Someone shortly after, I'm rambling now, but I'm going to tell this quick part of this story. I'm a critical incident stress management team member for first responders, and the head of that team had reached out and said, oh, you know, sorry to hear about the loss. If you want to talk, let's go out for a coffee. I took him up on it because my husband wasn't gonna, he couldn't be a support. He was too angry at my family. He was a support in validating my feelings. Right. And I wasn't going to bring my kids into it. It's not for them. And I didn't have anyone else. So I took this guy up on the coffee. And we're sitting there having coffee, and he says to me, so when's the first time your family abandoned you? And all these memories came in. And yeah, them telling me on that day in August 2016 that they never wanted anything to do with me ever again just knocked me flat on my ass. And I got a service dog who literally has saved my life. So part of what has come from that is knowing the power of a service dog, how service dogs save lives. And my vision for 2024 is putting together an anthology of service dog owners called Phoenix Rising, Stories of Service Dogs Saving Lives. And it just has kind of grown. And I'm pondering creating an NPO to raise money for people to get service dogs, people with PTSD.
That's awesome.
So that's probably more of an answer than you were looking for.
Oh, it was beautiful. I got chills when you said, when's the first time your family abandoned you? I got chills in my body. I just wanted you to know. Yeah. That's amazing. Because that's the work I work with people. I'm a life coach, and, you know, I take them back to their past. And a lot of it is, oh, that's still there. Like, even when I'm being coached or therapied, I couldn't think of the word when I'm getting therapy, and something comes up, I'm like, oh, like, so when you said that, I got chills. I'm like, oh, it's one of those oh moments, you know? Yeah. Yeah. And I wanted to rewind a little bit and just comment on how sad it is when I want to say when people are so blinded that they blame the wrong person for somebody else's actions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like it's really sad. And our initial reaction is to hate them when really they're just sick, you know.
I have such compassion for them.
Yeah.
You know, the pastor that I worked with when I was a church secretary, what a gift to be someone who told me I can be and do anything I wanted and helped me and encouraged me and supported me. And then other mentors that I've had in my life, how fortunate I've been. And I'm really sad that my siblings didn't get that same gift.
Yeah.
Who could they have become?
This, ladies and gentlemen, is the definition of strength. I'm just going to leave you with that. You're welcome. Well, I think this is a really good place to end this episode on a high note of just try to understand rather than hate, you know?
Hate.
And even if you don't understand, just know that hurt people hurt people.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So that's a big lesson I've learned in my life. Yeah.
Yep.
So I do have one more question for you, which is if you had one piece of advice that you could give to the world, what would it be?
Ooh, one piece of advice to give to the world. How to sum it up, how to put this in words. Step back and look at the full picture of someone. You know, you said hurt people hurt people.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We tend to look at someone this way, straight ahead. We see them one way, and we don't take time to circle around them and their lives and look at that person from all different perspectives to really see who they are. Because we're all valuable. It's just been squashed somehow in a lot of people.
Yeah. Mic drop. Ladies and gentlemen, Lee Atherton signing off. Until next time.